What would you do if the smallest person in a courtroom exposed the biggest wound in the room? Before this story is over, a 7-year-old girl will wrap her arms around Judge Caprio, and what happens in the seconds after that hug will leave an entire courthouse in tears. Drop a comment telling us whether you believe mercy belongs in a courtroom. Hit that subscribe button if you believe one moment of compassion can change a life. Like this video if you believe children sometimes see truth more clearly than adults ever do. And share this with someone who needs to remember that justice without heart can still leave a family broken. At 9:17 on a gray Friday morning, April 18, 2025, the monitor outside Courtroom 2B at Providence Municipal Court flashed case number PMCTR 2504186. The defendant was listed as Daniel Mercer, age 34, Providence resident, occupation marked simply as former HVAC technician. The charges looked ordinary on paper: parking in an emergency access lane, operating a vehicle with a suspended registration, failure to maintain active insurance, disorderly conduct toward an officer, total fines and costs, $1,486. But nothing about the man standing at the defense table looked ordinary once you really saw him. He wore a charcoal Nike hoodie with a bleach stain near the pocket, faded Levi's, and a pair of red wingwork boots scuffed so badly they looked like they had kicked through 3 years of bad luck. His beard was uneven, like he'd trimmed it with dull clippers in a gas station mirror. His hands were rough, split across the knuckles, and he kept clenching them against the wood rail as if the courtroom itself had insulted him. Standing beside him was a little girl so small she barely cleared the railing. She wore a pale yellow Carter's cardigan buttoned wrong by one hole, a blue H&M dress, silver Skechers that blinked every time she shifted her feet, and a pink disposable face mask hanging loose under her chin. On one wrist was a plastic hospital bracelet she should have taken off days earlier but hadn't. She held a purple backpack with both hands and pressed it against her chest like a shield. Her name was Sophia Mercer. She was 7 years old. And before the morning was over, every person in that room would remember her. If you've ever seen someone use anger like armor, you already know the look Daniel Mercer had. He was not the loudest man in the courtroom that morning. He was worse. He was the kind of quiet angry that made people pull their chairs in a little closer and avoid eye contact. Court clerk Donna Mancini noticed it first when she called his name, and he answered with a flat, "Yeah, I'm here," like even being present was a favor. Bailiff Tom Keegan didn't miss it either. He shifted near the aisle, one hand resting low on his belt, not threatening, just ready. And Judge Frank Caprio definitely saw it. Caprio had already heard 11 cases that morning: a double-parked contractor, a college kid arguing over an expired meter, a woman who cried because she chose groceries over tickets. He knew excuses. He knew attitude. He knew when someone was performing for sympathy and when someone was drowning too deep to ask for help. Daniel looked like a man who would rather choke on his pride than take a hand extended toward him. "Mr. Mercer," Judge Caprio said, voice calm, almost gentle, "I see you brought your daughter." Daniel glanced down without softening. Couldn't get anyone to watch her. The little girl looked up at the bench and gave the smallest nod, as if she wanted the judge to know she was not trouble. "Good morning, young lady," Caprio said. "Good morning," she whispered. Her voice barely reached the microphone, but it changed the room. Not enough to save her father, not yet. Drop a comment telling us if you think a courtroom changes the second a child walks in. Like this video if you believe judges see more than just paperwork. And if stories of second chances mean something to you, stay with us, because this is where everything started to crack. Prosecutor Neil Warren stepped forward with a stack of printed reports clipped in blue. "Your Honor, on February 27, 2025, at approximately 6:14 p.m., Providence police officer Elena Ruiz responded to an illegally parked vehicle obstructing the emergency ambulance lane at Hasbro Children's Hospital on Eddy Street. Vehicle was a blue 2014 Nissan Altima, Rhode Island plate 4KM271, registered to the defendant. Officer made contact. Defendant became verbally aggressive, refused repeated instructions, and was later found to be operating the vehicle while registration was suspended. The words landed clean, hard, administrative. Then came the next line. The obstruction caused a documented delay to an incoming pediatric transport vehicle. There was a shift in the gallery, a rustle, a whisper. Someone behind the second row muttered, "Oh boy." Judge Caprio leaned back slightly. A delay to a pediatric transport. Yes, Your Honor. That was the moment the case stopped being just another ticket. Daniel looked straight ahead, jaw flexing. He didn't deny it. He didn't apologize. He didn't even blink. Caprio's gaze moved to the child beside him. Sophia's fingers tightened around the backpack strap. She had heard enough words in hospitals to know when adults were talking about something bad. "Mr. Mercer," Caprio asked, "were you parked in an emergency lane outside a children's hospital?" Daniel finally spoke with that hard, flat edge. "I was there for my daughter." "That was not my question." Daniel exhaled through his nose. "Yeah, I was parked there." "Did you understand ambulances use that lane?" "Yes." "And you parked there anyway?" Daniel turned slightly toward the microphone. "You ever had a kid struggling to breathe in your back seat, Your Honor? Because signs don't matter much when your child is turning gray." The room froze. It was the kind of line people remember. Not because it was noble, because it was dangerous. It carried truth and defiance in the same breath. Judge Caprio did not raise his voice. He rarely had to. "Fear may explain your conduct, Mr. Mercer. It does not erase the consequences of it." That was quote number one people would repeat later. "Fear may explain your conduct. It does not erase the consequences of it." Daniel gave a bitter laugh under his breath. "That's easy to say from up there." Bailiff Keegan straightened. Donna Mancini looked up sharply from the keyboard. Sophia whispered, "Daddy." But Daniel had already stepped over the line. And then the prosecutor asked the court to play the body cam footage. The monitor on the left side of the courtroom flickered to life. Grainy, blue-tinted, timestamp in the upper corner, 2/27/25/18, 1942. Wind crackled through Officer Ruiz's microphone as she approached the blue Nissan with hazard lights blinking in the ambulance zone. The vehicle was crooked, half over the red-painted curb. Behind it, a medical transport van angled wide to get around. On the footage, Officer Ruiz shouted, "Sir, you cannot leave this car here. Move it now." Daniel appeared seconds later, jogging out from the sliding ER doors. His hoodie was unzipped. His hair was damp with sweat. He looked terrified. Then he opened his mouth. "I was inside for 2 minutes." "Sir, move the vehicle." "My kid is in there." "Move the vehicle now." And then Daniel did what many desperate people do when fear becomes humiliation in public. He turned it into fury. "This whole place is a joke," he snapped on the video. "I'm trying to keep my daughter alive and you're worried about paint on the ground." "Sir, step back. Don't talk to me like I'm some criminal." The body cam captured Officer Ruiz's face tightening, not with cruelty, with caution. Behind her, lights flashed. A transport van edged forward. A medic waved in frustration. Then came the line that made several people in the courtroom actually wince. "I swear," Daniel shouted on the footage, "you people care more about rules than kids." At that, the judge looked away from the screen and toward the real little girl standing in front of him. Sophia was staring at the floor. That told him more than the video did. If you've ever watched someone realize a child has heard the worst version of them, you know how heavy that silence gets. Hit subscribe if you believe words can wound even when they're not aimed at children. Share this with someone who needs to remember that pressure reveals character before it rebuilds it, because the next piece of evidence made the whole room turn against Daniel Mercer. The prosecutor asked for the hospital surveillance clip. The camera angle came from above the emergency loop. No sound, just clean overhead footage from a security camera mounted near the sliding doors. Timestamp 18/20/11. Daniel's Nissan sat in the red zone. A pediatric transport van with hazard lights pulled in from Eddy Street and tried to line up at the curb. It had to swing wide around the Nissan. Two medics jumped out. One opened the side door. A stretcher came down fast. On it was a small boy with blood matting the side of his face, oxygen tubing under his nose, one arm strapped in place. The van lost seconds. Only seconds. But seconds look different when a child is on a stretcher. In the courtroom, nobody moved. Not when the medics struggled to clear the angle. Not when one of them slapped the side of the Nissan in frustration. Not when a woman burst from the van after them, one hand over her mouth, clearly the boy's mother, running so hard she nearly slipped. The clip ended after 68 seconds. Judge Caprio folded his hands. "Who was the child in the transport van?" he asked. The prosecutor checked the report. Liam Ortega, 6 years old, head trauma after a scooter accident. And the delay. Hospital incident report states approximately 78 seconds from entry to stretcher clearance. A wisp. Swept the courtroom. 78 seconds. To most people that sounded small. To parents it sounded endless. Caprio looked back at Daniel. "You understand now why this is not just a parking ticket." Daniel swallowed once, hard. "I understand what it looks like." "No," Caprio said quietly, "you understand what happened." That was quote number 2. "You understand what happened." Daniel's face flushed. "You want me to say I didn't care, is that it? You want the whole villain thing nice and easy. Fine, I parked there, fine, I yelled, fine. But my daughter had a fever of 104. She has acute lymphoblastic leukemia. The garage arm was jammed, the drop-off was full, and I carried her through those doors because I thought if I stopped moving, she'd die." The room changed again. Sophia squeezed her eyes shut. Even the prosecutor softened, just a fraction. The outrage did not disappear. It split, half aimed at Daniel, half at the impossible choices that crush people before they break them. Judge Caprio looked at the child's hospital bracelet. "How long has your daughter been sick?" Daniel stared straight ahead. 9 months. "And her mother?" That was the first question Daniel seemed unprepared for. He licked his lip. "Past last June." No one wrote for a second. Donna Mancini's fingers stopped above the keyboard. "What was her name?" Caprio asked. "Grace." "How old was she?" 32. Sophia's small hand slipped into her father's fist then. It was the first time they touched all morning. Daniel did not look down, but his knuckles loosened around her hand. There it was, the first crack. Not enough to absolve him, not even close, but enough to tell everyone the story was about to get more complicated. Because just when it looked like pain might explain his anger, the courtroom doors opened, and 3 more people stepped inside. A woman in a navy puffer coat, holding a manila envelope. A little boy with a healing scar near his eyebrow. And Officer Elena Ruiz, the same officer from the footage, carrying another report. Everyone in the room knew that meant there was more. Much more. The woman's name was Rosa Ortega. She was Liam's mother. Liam wore a tiny red zip-up Adidas jacket, black joggers, and one blue cast shoe over a sneaker because his left foot still hadn't fully healed from the crash. His scar ran from the edge of his eyebrow into his hairline, puckered and pink under the fluorescent lights. He looked around the courtroom with the solemn confusion children, where when adults tell them something is important but don't explain why. Rosa took a seat in the front row. She never looked at Daniel. Officer Ruiz stood near the prosecution table and handed over a supplemental incident sheet. There was also a letter from Dr. Priya Shah, pediatric oncology, and a note from hospital social worker Lee Benton. The case had turned into something bigger because everyone connected to it had felt the shockwave. Judge Caprio read in silence for nearly a minute. That minute felt like 5. The only sounds were the low buzz of the light over the jury box, a cough from somewhere in the hall, and Sophia's sneaker soles squeaking softly every time she shifted her weight. Finally, Caprio looked up. "Mr. Mercer, according to the hospital social worker, this was not your first incident of verbal aggression during your daughter's treatment." Daniel closed his eyes for one beat. "No." She documents 3 episodes, one with registration staff, one with a parking attendant, one with a pharmacy technician. Daniel said nothing. "Did these incidents happen?" "They happened." So this was not a single bad day. Daniel's jaw tightened. "It's been a bad year." Caprio nodded once. "I don't doubt that, but being in pain does not grant permission to spread pain." That was quote number 3. Being in pain does not grant permission to spread pain. This time, even Daniel seemed to feel it. His shoulders dipped just barely. The judge turned to the letter from Dr. Shah. "Doctor writes that your daughter is in active treatment and that on the evening in question she presented with neutropenic fever. She also writes that despite your conduct, you have never missed a scheduled chemotherapy session and that your daughter consistently arrives clean, fed, and with her medication organized." For the first time, Daniel's expression changed. Not relief, not pride, something more fragile. The look of a man who had not heard himself described as reliable in a very long time. Then Caprio read the next line. "She also writes that your daughter often attempts to comfort you during procedures." A sound escaped Sophia before she could stop it, a tiny embarrassed breath. She buried her face against the backpack. The judge's eyes softened, but not his voice. "Children should not have to manage adult fear, Mr. Mercer." Daniel looked like he'd been hit. And still the hardest moment hadn't come yet. Rosa Ortega stood when the judge called her name. Her NDS were steady, her voice was not. "I'm not here because I want him crushed," she said. "I'm here because I want him to understand." That sentence alone could have carried the whole morning. She held up the manila envelope. Inside were copies of Liam's intake report, one photo taken later in the ER after stitches, and a short written statement she had asked the court to hear. Her son looked up at her, then at Daniel, then at Sophia. He didn't seem angry, just observant, the way children are when adults fail loudly in front of them. "On February 27th, Rosa said, my son fell off a scooter going downhill on Messer Street. He hit the curb and the side of a parked car. He was unconscious for maybe 15 seconds, maybe less. I still hear it, though. The sound his head made. I still hear it when I try to sleep." The courtroom was dead quiet. "I rode in that transport van with him. I saw the car in the lane. I saw the medics lose time. I saw one of them hit the hood with his palm because he was trying not to scream. And for those 78 seconds, I thought my son was going to die because someone decided his emergency mattered more than mine." Daniel finally looked at her. Really looked. Rosa's eyes were shining now, but her chin stayed level. "And here's the part that made me even angrier," she said. 2 days later, I saw that same man asleep in a plastic chair on 7 West Pediatric Oncology while his daughter got antibiotics. Same hoodie, same boots, his neck bent at an angle nobody sleeps at unless they haven't slept for months." A low murmur moved through the gallery. Rosa inhaled slowly. "I wanted to hate him. It would have been easier. But then his little girl dropped a stuffed rabbit in the hallway, and when I picked it up, she said thank you and then asked if my son was the boy with the stitches. I asked how she knew. She said, I saw the blood on the blanket. Sophia stared at the floor, so hard it looked like she might disappear into it. Rosa continued. Then she said something I have not been able to forget. She said, my dad gets loud when he gets scared. He used to only get loud at football games. Now he gets loud everywhere. There were actual gasps in the courtroom. Not big theatrical gasps, the real kind, air pulled through teeth, shock, recognition, pain. Daniel's face went white. Because there is no witness more brutal than a child who tells the truth, without knowing it is devastating. Like this video, if you believe the hardest truths are often the quietest ones. Drop a comment telling us whether that little girl should have had to carry a sentence like that. And stay with this story, because Daniel Mercer had just begun to understand the damage he had done, but the most heartbreaking piece of evidence was still zipped inside Sophia's purple backpack. Judge Caprio let the silence breathe. He knew the room needed it. Then he asked Rosa the question nobody expected. What do you want from this court? Rosa looked at Daniel for a long time before answering. I want him to stop using fear as an excuse to make strangers bleed for his life. No one moved. Then she added, and I want that little girl to never have to explain him again. That was quote number 4. I want that little girl to never have to explain him again. Daniel's breathing changed. You could see it in his chest, fast, shallow, angry at himself now, not them. Judge Caprio turned to him. Mr. Mercer, do you have anything you wish to say before I continue? Daniel stepped toward the microphone. At first it looked like the same defiance from earlier, the same squared shoulders, the same jaw locked shut. Then his voice came out wrong. Not loud, not hard. Thin. I didn't know it was her kid, he said, nodding toward Rosa. I didn't know it was him. Rosa didn't respond. Daniel tried again. That's not an excuse, I didn't know. Caprio watched him carefully. Who did you think would be affected by parking there? Daniel opened his mouth, then closed it. There was no good answer. That was the point. I wasn't thinking past the door, he admitted. That, Caprio said, is how harm often works. Not because people plan evil, because they stop their concern at the edge of their own crisis. Quote number 5. Harm often begins where concern ends. Daniel nodded once, like the truth of it hurt. The judge then lifted the note from Lee Benton, the hospital social worker. Ms. Benton writes that when staff attempted to help with transportation vouchers and emergency family housing, you refused every offer. I'm not a charity case. You were a father in over his head. Daniel's nostrils flared. You don't know me. Caprio's reply came instantly. I know enough. Pride has kept more families hungry than poverty ever could. That one landed like a hammer. Several people in the gallery murmured under their breath. One woman actually whispered, "That's true." Daniel looked like he wanted to fight the sentence. He couldn't. Beck. Oz somewhere in the middle of that courtroom. He knew it was true. He had refused rental help, refused gas cards, refused free meals from the hospital pantry, refused church donations, refused a GoFundMe his sister tried to start. He had told himself he was protecting his dignity when really he was protecting the last piece of control he had left. But pride is expensive, and children pay interest. Sophia tugged at his sleeve. Daddy. He looked down. Can I say something? His eyes shut for half a second. Not now, soft. Judge Caprio heard it. Maybe now is exactly the right time. Daniel hesitated. Every adult in the room could feel the tension in that single pause. Let the child speak, and the mask might come all the way off. Stop her, and everyone would understand why. Finally, Daniel stepped back. Sophia moved toward the microphone slowly, blinking under the harsh court lights. She looked at the judge, then at Rosa, then at Liam, then at her own shoes. Her fingers found the zipper on the purple backpack. "I wrote something," she said. Donna Mancini lowered her head. She already knew she was going to cry. "Would you like me to read it?" Judge Caprio asked. "Or would you like to read it yourself?" Sophia thought about that seriously, the way only children do when asked a respectful question. "I want to try." She pulled out a folded sheet of notebook paper decorated with crooked hearts in purple marker. The top edge was wrinkled. A corner had been softened by being opened and closed too many times. Her small voice trembled as she unfolded it. "Dear Judge Caprio," she read, sounding out the last name carefully even though she clearly practiced it in the car. "Please don't think my dad is a bad guy. He gets angry because he is scared, and he gets scared because too many bad things happen too fast." No one breathed. "He makes my oatmeal not lumpy because I hate lumps. He learned how to braid by watching videos, but it comes out weird. He sleeps in the chair when I'm sick even when his neck hurts. He always lets me have the blue Gatorade even though he likes blue best too." A soft laugh broke through tears somewhere in the back row. Sophia kept reading. "When my mom died, he said he would be both parents, but sometimes he is too tired to be even one. I think he is trying. I know he yells. I know that is bad. I told him it makes my chest feel tight even when I am not sick. He cried in the car when he thought I was asleep. I am not supposed to know that." Daniel covered his mouth with his hand. The judge removed his glasses. Sophia's paper shook harder now. "If you have to be mad, can you be a little mad and not a lot? Because I still need him. Also, I am sorry about the yelling. Love, Sophia Mercer, age 7 3/4." The last line broke the room. Not dramatically, not all at once. It broke the way ice cracks under too much weight, quiet at first, then everywhere. Rosa Ortega lowered her face and cried openly. Officer Ruiz looked away toward the wall and swallowed hard. Bailiff Keegan rubbed the bridge of his nose like he suddenly had dust in his eyes. Daniel bent over the railing, shoulders shaking once, then again, trying to hold himself together and failing in public for the first time all year. And still Judge Caprio was not finished. Because mercy without accountability would have cheapened everything Sophia had just done. He leaned forward. "Sophia, that is one of the bravest letters I have ever heard in this courtroom." She nodded, serious again. "Now I need you to understand something. Loving someone does not mean covering up what they did wrong." "I know," she whispered. "Do you?" She turned slightly and looked at Liam. "I know." That answer was so simple, so clear, that several people in the room later said that was the exact moment they knew the video would go viral. Not because it was cute, because it was honest. Judge Caprio then asked Sophia the question that changed the morning. "What do you think should happen to your dad?" Daniel turned fast. "Your Honor." Caprio held up a hand. "Let her answer." Sophia frowned in concentration. "I think he should say sorry all the way, not just court sorry." The judge tilted his head. "What is all the way sorry?" She answered immediately. "When your face matches your words." Nobody forgot that line. When your face matches your words. Caprio glanced at Daniel. "Your daughter just described remorse better than most adults." Daniel's eyes were red now. He wiped them angrily, like tears had betrayed him. Then the judge asked for one last piece of evidence before ruling. The surveillance clip played again. This time, however, Caprio asked that it continue 30 seconds longer than before. The courtroom watched the ambulance delay once more. The crooked Nissan, the stretcher, the lost time, Rosa running. Then the clip advanced. At 18:21:26, after the transport cleared, a man came stumbling back into frame from the hospital entrance. It was Daniel. He wasn't yelling now, he wasn't posturing, he wasn't looking at the officer. He was carrying Sophia. She looked boneless in his arms, head fallen back against his elbow, one hand limp at his shoulder. Daniel ran along the sidewalk because he had finally moved the car and was trying to reach the correct intake bay after being redirected by staff. He nearly slipped, then kept going. The clip showed something his body cam rant had hidden. He was panicking. Not performing it, not weaponizing it, living inside it. The room watched him disappear off camera, holding his daughter like a man trying to outrun death and rules at the same time. When the video ended, the silence was even heavier. That, Caprio said, is why these cases are hard, because two things can be true at once. You can be terrified for your child and still make a choice that endangers someone else's child. That was the line people clipped and shared later more than any other. Two things can be true at once. Daniel stared at the blank monitor. I hate that video. Why? Because I look exactly how I felt. And how was that? Like I was losing everything, and there wasn't enough time to lose it correctly. No one in that courtroom had ever heard desperation put quite like that. Like this video, if you believe two truths can collide in one human moment. Hit subscribe if you stay for stories that don't flatten people into heroes or villains. Because what happened next was the courtroom's breaking point. Judge Caprio called Daniel back to the microphone. "Mr. Mercer," he said, "you owe Ms. Ortega an apology. You owe Officer Ruiz an apology. You owe your daughter a life in which she does not have to translate your anger for strangers. And you owe this court an answer. Are you ready to stop hiding behind rage?" Daniel did not answer right away. His throat worked once, twice. Then he turned toward Rosa Ortega. "I am sorry I scared you," he said, "not court flat, real. I am sorry your son lost 1 second because of me, let alone 78. I keep telling myself I didn't mean harm, but that doesn't put time back in the clock. I saw your boy just now. I saw him on that stretcher. I saw you running. I can't take that away." Rosa cried silently, but she held his gaze. Daniel turned toward Officer Ruiz. "I'm sorry for talking to you like you were the enemy. You were doing your job. I made you into a target because I needed one." Officer Ruiz nodded once, professional but affected. Then he turned to Sophia. That was the hardest part. There was no microphone big enough for what a father has to say when his child has seen him become someone she fears. He knelt down in his red wings, one knee hitting the courtroom floor with an audible thud. His voice broke on the first word. "I am so sorry, baby." Sophia did not move. "I thought if I got angry enough, nothing bad could touch us. I thought being soft was the same as being weak. I was wrong. I made you feel unsafe when you were the one person I was supposed to make safe. I am sorry all the way." When your face matches your words. Everyone in the room looked at Sophia to see whether she believed him. She studied him for a long moment. Then she reached out and touched the corner of his eye with one finger where the tears had gathered. "Your face matches," she whispered. Rosa covered her mouth. Donna Mancini started crying outright. Even Liam leaned forward a little, as if he understood something sacred was happening. This would have been enough for most courtroom stories, enough for a clip, enough for millions of views, enough for an ending. But it wasn't the ending, because Judge Caprio had not given his ruling. And just as he began to speak, Court Clerk Donna Mancini froze, leaned toward the judge, and slid an older paper file across the bench. Caprio opened it, his expression changed. "What is it?" Daniel asked, voice suddenly tight again. The judge looked at him over the file. "Mr. Mercer, were you aware there is an outstanding compliance warrant connected to a 2019 failure to appear on a previous municipal citation?" The entire room stiffened. Sophia's hand tightened around her father's sleeve. Daniel went pale all over again. I thought that was closed. It was not. Prosecutor Warren checked the docket. Your Honor, it appears to be an unpaid balance of $290 on a prior citation and a missed compliance hearing dated June 18, 2024. June 18. The date hit Daniel like a fist. No, he said softly. No, that can't be right. Caprio's tone stayed steady. Were you present for that hearing? Daniel stared at the paper as if it might rearrange itself into mercy. No. And why not? The answer took too long. Too long not because he was inventing something. Too long because some memories drag barbed wire behind them. Because that was the day my wife died, he said. The words didn't just enter the courtroom. They detonated in it. June 18, 2024. The missed hearing. The date Grace Mercer died. Donna Mancini's. Eyes flew to the obituary paper clipped inside the file, then back to the judge. The date matched. Caprio asked quietly, "You have documentation of that?" Daniel gave a sharp, humorless laugh. "You think I forget the date my wife died?" The judge did not take offense. He turned pages in silence. There it was, a scanned obituary, Grace Eleanor Mercer, 32, survived by husband Daniel and daughter Sophia. Memorial service June 22, St. Michael's Parish, Cranston. The room seemed to exhale and hold it at the same time. Sophia looked confused now, as children often do when adults open old grief in public. "Daddy." He couldn't answer her. Caprio closed the old file and folded his hands. "Mr. Mercer, this court does not ignore open warrants." Daniel shut his eyes. "I know. But this court also does not ignore context." There was the turn. The one everyone felt before they understood it. Caprio looked at the prosecutor. "Mr. Warren, given the verified death of the defendant's spouse on the date of non-appearance, I find good cause to vacate the compliance warrant and reopen the matter for disposition today." Warren nodded. "No objection, Your Honor." Sophia let out a little breath she had been storing in her whole body. Daniel looked stunned, not relieved yet stunned. Judge Caprio continued, "Do not confuse that with escape from responsibility, Mr. Mercer. This is not a gift. This is accuracy." That line, too, would travel. Mercy is not the opposite of accountability. It is accountability measured with full vision. He said it slowly enough that everyone heard every word. Then came the ruling on the present case. But before Caprio could deliver it, something happened that no one had scripted, no one had requested, and no one in that room would ever forget. Sophia stepped away from her father. At first people thought she was just moving closer to hear. Then she rounded the rail. Bailiff Keegan instinctively shifted, then stopped when Judge Caprio lifted a hand. The little girl walked across the polished courtroom floor in flashing silver Skechers, clutching the crumpled letter in one hand. She stopped at the bench, craned her neck up, and looked at the judge with the kind of trust that terrifies adults when they know they can either honor it or fail it. "Thank you for listening," she said. Then, before anyone could speak, she opened her arms. The judge stood. He came down from behind the bench, slow because he understood the holiness of not rushing a child's courage. He bent carefully, and Sophia threw both arms around his neck. The room went perfectly still. Not quiet. Still. No papers turning, no keyboard tapping, no coughs from the hallway. Even the fluorescent buzz seemed to retreat. Caprio hugged her back with one hand on the back of her cardigan and one hand gently over her hair. And then the thing that made hardened officers look away and seasoned court staff cry into tissues happened. Sophia whispered into the judge's shoulder, not realizing the courtroom microphone near the bench would catch it. "Can you help my dad stay the dad I wrote about?" There are sentences too pure to protect yourself from. That was one of them. Judge Caprio closed his eyes. Donna Mancini put both hands over her face. Officer Ruiz turned away completely now, blinking hard. Rosa Ortega wept openly. And Daniel Mercer, the man who had spent nearly a year believing tears were weakness, broke in half in front of everyone. He did not wipe his face. He did not hide. He leaned against the defense table and sobbed with the ugly, uncontrollable grief of a person who has run out of places to store pain. The gallery cried with him. That was what happened next. Not just tears. Permission. Permission for a whole room full of adults to stop pretending that survival alone is strength. Judge Caprio eased back, kept one hand on Sophia's shoulder, and looked straight at Daniel. The law can fine a man, he said, voice thick but steady. Only love can rebuild him. The question before me is whether you are willing to do the rebuilding. Daniel could barely speak. Yes. Not for this courtroom. Yes. Not for the video clip this may become. Daniel shook his head. For her. Daniel looked at Sophia. For her. Caprio nodded. Good, because now the real sentence begins. Share this with someone who needs to hear that line. Drop a comment telling us the last time compassion hit you harder than punishment. And stay with us, because just when it looked like the room had reached its emotional limit, Rosa Ortega did something no one saw coming. She stood. Your Honor, she said through tears, may I say one more thing? You may. Rosa stepped into the open space between the gallery and counsel table. Liam moved with her small hand in hers. She stopped in front of Daniel first. When I saw your daughter in the oncology hall, she said, I went home angry. Then I thought about something. Pain makes people selfish if they don't have help, but children should not be crushed under their parents' unhealed pain. So I need to ask you something, and I need you to answer me honestly. Daniel nodded, unable to speak. Are you ready to accept help this time? Or are you going to keep calling it pride while your little girl calls it fear? Daniel's shoulders shook again. I'm ready. Rosa held his gaze another second, testing him. Then she did the impossible. She reached out and embraced Sophia. Not Daniel. Sophia, the daughter of the man who had delayed her son's emergency transport. The courtroom shattered again. Liam, seeing his mother hug Sophia, stepped forward awkwardly and held out the rabbit she had dropped in the hospital days earlier. Purple, slightly worn, one ear bent. You forgot this before, he said. Sophia took it with both hands. Thank you. You're welcome. That image became the emotional center of the entire day. Not the bench, not the fines, not the legal language. Two hurt children in one room, carrying what adults had done around them, still finding room for gentleness. Everyone in the room knew they were watching something rare. Not innocence. Moral clarity. Judge Caprio gave the room a moment, then resumed from the bench. Here is my ruling, he said. Daniel straightened, eyes red, hands open at his sides now. No armor left. On the emergency lane obstruction and suspended registration, fines are imposed but suspended in part. On the disorderly conduct citation, conviction will be held in abeyance for 6 months pending full compliance with these conditions. He paused, making sure Daniel heard every word. You will complete 80 hours of supervised community service through hospital family transport support or another approved pediatric family assistance program. You will attend 12 weeks of grief counseling and anger management through the Municipal Restorative Services referral. You will submit proof of insurance reinstatement and registration compliance within 45 days. You will write letters of apology to Officer Ruiz and the pediatric transport team. You will also meet with Ms. Benton, the social worker, and accept the assistance she offered. Daniel nodded so fast it was almost painful to watch. "And one more condition," the judge said. Daniel looked up. "You will allow other people to help your family." A soft laugh, wet with tears, moved through the courtroom. Daniel actually smiled for the first time that morning, though it broke in the middle. "Yes, Your Honor." Caprio was not done. "Financially, I am reducing the immediate payable amount today to $100. The balance is stayed conditioned on compliance. Miss one condition and the full amount returns." Daniel's mouth opened. He looked stunned. "I can pay the 100 today." "Can you?" Daniel hesitated. That was honesty now, not pride. "Not today," he admitted. "I can pay 50 next Friday." Caprio nodded. "Then 50 next Friday, and because this court prefers truth to performance, I accept that." That line earned a few broken chuckles. The judge turned toward Sophia. "Young lady, your father has work to do." "I know. So do you." She blinked at me. "Yes, keep telling the truth." She nodded solemnly. Then Caprio leaned back and added the sentence that became the most quoted clip of the whole story. "Anger is grief with its fists up. Healing begins when the fists open." Millions would repeat that line later. But the morning still wasn't over. Because as court staff began shuffling papers and people tried to compose themselves, Officer Elena Ruiz asked permission to address the court. Caprio gave it. She stepped forward, no longer just the officer from the body cam. Now she was part of the human story the case had become. "Your Honor, for the record, I accept Mr. Mercer's apology. And I'd also like the court to know that on the night of the incident, after his daughter was stabilized, Mr. Mercer came back outside at 11:03 p.m. and looked for me in the parking lot." Daniel looked up, surprised. "He didn't find me," Ruiz continued, "but he left a note under the windshield wiper of my cruiser. I kept it." She unfolded a creased piece of paper from her pocket. "I'm not reading this to excuse anything," she said, "just to complete the picture." She read aloud. "Officer, I know I was out of line. I am not asking you to forget it. I just want you to know I was scared. That's not your fault. If my daughter makes it through the night, I'll spend the rest of my life wishing I had spoken to you better. If she doesn't, I'll still wish it." The room tightened all over again. Ruiz folded the note carefully. "I kept it because it sounded like a man who knew he had become someone he didn't recognize." Daniel covered his eyes. Caprio nodded slowly. "Thank you, officer." Ruiz then did one more thing nobody expected. She took an envelope from her folder and handed it to Donna Mancini for the record. "This is a list of local officers who already contributed to a gas card fund for the M. Mercer family after hearing about the daughter's treatment. We were planning to remain anonymous. I think maybe anonymity is no longer possible." There was a stunned murmur. Daniel looked genuinely bewildered. "Why would you do that after how I talked to you?" Officer Ruiz's answer was simple. "Because your daughter was shivering in the triage chair, and none of this is about my ego." That line hit almost as hard as Sophia's letter. "None of this is about my ego." Caprio nodded toward Ruiz with visible respect. "That is public service." Daniel took a shaky breath and whispered, "Thank you." Then came the unexpected twist nobody in the room saw coming, not even Judge Caprio. Donna Mancini, sorting the file, found one more folded page tucked between the oncology letter and the social worker note. It had not been marked as evidence. It was a faxed cover sheet from St. Michael's Parish Counseling Office with a handwritten note attached in blue ink. Caprio frowned. "Mr. Mercer, did you submit this?" Daniel looked confused. "No." The clerk handed it up. The note was brief, unmistakably feminine, dated June 3, 2024, 2 weeks before Grace died. Caprio read it silently, then looked at Daniel. This appears to be from your late wife. Daniel's entire body went still. What? The judge read carefully. It says, if Daniel ever ends up in court because life has made him harder than he really is, please tell him being needed is not the same thing as being invincible. He listens badly when he is scared, but he loves deeply. Make him sit still long enough to hear that. No one spoke. Caprio checked the fax line again. It had been attached to an intake request Grace made with the parish social outreach office before her final hospitalization, authorizing future counseling contact for Daniel if needed. The note had been copied into the packet by a hurried staff member sending records that morning. Daniel looked like the floor had disappeared. She wrote that. Donna Mancini, already crying again, nodded. It appears so. He took one step back and grabbed the defense table to steady himself. Sophia looked up. That's Mom. He couldn't answer. Because grief does not move in straight lines. Sometimes it waits a year, then walks into a courtroom wearing paperwork and handwriting and destroys you with tenderness. Judge Caprio set the page down very carefully. Mr. Mercer, I think your wife understood you very well. Daniel laughed and cried at the same time, the sound of a man hit by memory from two directions. Yeah, he whispered. She did. Sophia tugged his sleeve. Can we keep that? Caprio smiled softly. I think that would be appropriate. By now, nobody in the room was pretending this was just another case. Even the next defendants waiting outside would later ask what on earth happened in there, because several staff members had to step out and get themselves together before the docket could continue. But before the case concluded, Caprio called both families back to the front for one final moment. Ms. Ortega, he said, your grace this morning has honored your son's suffering without turning it into vengeance. Rosa shook her head. I'm still angry. I know, the judge said. Forgiveness is not the absence of anger. It is the decision not to hand anger the steering wheel. That became another quotable line people clipped and shared. He turned to Daniel. And you, Mr. Mercer, are leaving this courtroom with less money owed than you feared and more work ahead than you expected. That is as it should be. Daniel nodded. I understand. Caprio pointed gently toward Sophia. Your daughter did not save you from consequences today. She saved you from lying about who you are. Daniel's lips trembled. Yes, Your Honor. Then the judge looked at both children. Liam, Sophia, I want you both to hear something from me. The adults in your life are supposed to protect you. Sometimes they fail. When they do, it is never your job to become smaller so they can stay comfortable. Rosa cried harder. Officer Ruiz stared at the floor. Daniel bowed his head. That sentence alone could heal parts of people. And then at 10:42 a.m., with the courtroom still heavy and holy in that strange way true emotion makes public places feel, Caprio struck the gavel once. Case continued for compliance review in 90 days. Good luck to this family. Most cases end with the sound of a gavel. This one didn't. It ended for that day with people standing when they did not have to. Rosa helping Sophia zip her backpack. Officer Ruiz crouching to Liam's height and asking about his sneakers. Donna Mancini making a photocopy of Grace's note for the file while dabbing her eyes with a tissue. Bailiff Keegan quietly asking Daniel if he had transportation home. Neil Warren, the prosecutor, slipping 2 cafeteria vouchers across the table without comment. And Daniel, the man who entered the courtroom convinced the world only spoke punishment, stood there overwhelmed by Kai. And Dines he no longer knew how to reject. That was the resolution in the room. But not the full resolution. Because real redemption is never proven in a speech. It is proven in the weeks after people stop clapping. If this story is hitting you in the heart, subscribe now, because the update months later is the part most people never see. Drop a comment telling us whether second chances matter if they come with real conditions. Because Daniel Mercer left that courtroom changed, but the proof of change would not come until much later. 93 days later, on July 20, 2025, Daniel Mercer walked back into Providence Municipal Court for his compliance review wearing a clean white button-down shirt from Target, dark jeans without paint stains, and the same red wing boots, now polished. He had cut his hair. He stood straighter, not performatively, differently. Sophia was with him again. This time there was no hospital bracelet on her wrist. She wore a sunflower print dress, white keds, and a little denim jacket with a hand-sewn patch on the shoulder that read "Brave" in crooked yellow thread. She had more color in her face, more energy in her eyes. Her rabbit pepper peeked out from the backpack side pocket. When their case was called, Daniel handed up a neatly organized folder. Proof of insurance reinstatement. Registration compliance. A signed letter from the hospital family assistance coordinator confirming he had completed all 80 service hours and then volunteered an additional 22. Attendance confirmation for grief counseling and anger management, 12 of 12 sessions completed. 2 apology letters. And 1 extra item the court had not requested. A photo. Judge Caprio lifted it. It showed Daniel in a neon volunteer vest helping a family unload duffel bags and a folded stroller outside Hasbro Children's Hospital. Next to him stood Liam Ortega, wearing shin guards and a soccer jersey, grinning with a missing front tooth. Sophia stood on the other side, holding a paper cup of hot chocolate despite it being July, because children do not care that cocoa is seasonal. The judge smiled. Looks like you've made some friends. Daniel glanced back. Rosa and Liam were sitting in the gallery again. We started Saturday breakfasts after the volunteer shift, he said. Ms. Ortega said Liam needed someone to practice penalty kicks with. Turns out I needed that too. Rosa laughed softly. He's good, Your Honor, not at soccer, at showing up. That may have meant even more. Caprio reviewed the paperwork slowly. Not because he doubted it, but because the court honors effort by looking at it carefully. Mr. Mercer, he said at last, your reports indicate excellent compliance. Your counselor writes that your greatest breakthrough came in week 4 when you said, and I quote, "I thought anger made me the wall around my daughter. I didn't realize I had become the storm inside the house." Daniel gave a small embarrassed smile. Yeah, I said that. It's a good line. I paid enough for it. There was light laughter around the room. Caprio continued, your service coordinator also notes that you have a particular talent for calming parents in parking disputes because, again I quote, he speaks fluent panic. Even Daniel laughed at that one. Then Judge Caprio asked about Sophia. How are you doing, young lady? She beamed, I'm in remission. That single sentence put its own electricity through the room. Donna Mancini clapped before she could stop herself. Then everyone laughed, and a second later several people did clap, because sometimes protocol loses to relief. Sophia grinned wider. Dr. Shah said my blood work is beautiful. Beautiful blood work, Caprio said. That is the kind of beauty I like. Then Sophia reached into her backpack again. The whole courtroom laughed harder this time. What do you have there? The judge asked. A letter, she said. Daniel groaned softly. Of course you do. May I? Caprio nodded. You may always bring letters. Sophia unfolded the page, much neater this time. Dear Judge Caprio, she read, my dad did the things you said. He doesn't yell at parking people now. One time he squeezed the steering wheel very hard, but then he counted to 10 and only got to 6 because I reminded him. He also lets people help us. We got a new toaster from church and he did not call it charity. He called it breakfast technology. The courtroom laughed again. We moved into a small apartment near Roger Williams Park, and it has one window that sticks, but we like it. My dad made a chart for my medicine. He goes to a group on Tuesdays where he says feelings with other sad dads. That is what I call it. Also, he cried at my remission bell and did not care who saw. That means his face still matches. Daniel bent his head and smiled into one hand. Sophia finished with confidence. Thank